born from the Rye Civic League, and I'm standing in a park I've never been in. You probably haven't been in it, so stick around and find out what is this place you've never been to. All right, what happened in May? The New Hampshire DOT presented to the select board about the seawall repair work. They called that the revetment. There's the slides that they presented. You could walk through those or listen to the recording. The select board have updated the investment policy. So the trust funds have done a great job the last 25 years managing the longer term reserve funds. This was really focused on the short-term cash, try to get some interest revenue from that. The Rye Water District provided an update on the water treatment plant, what's happening there. You know, we're gonna have to pay for that. They talked about some of the rate. They also had a really interesting graph showing how a few people use a majority of the water, and those are homes, not businesses, in Rye. So take a look at that. Remember the Plan New Hampshire charrette we did? A lot of people came out from that, led to the Rye Town Center Committee, who came up with the TAP grant. The state was supposed to provide a project engineer. They're not doing that now. The select board had made DPW Director Rucker leading that, and they've disbanded the Rye Town Center Committee. So sort of the end of all that work we did on Plan New Hampshire and that charrette. The school board, the RES and Rye Junior High, the principals presented their action plan to the school board. Those are linked. You can read and walk through those. If you got kids in the school, care about the schools, the $16 million we spend on schools, worth reading. In protest, the school board signed the FY26 general assurances. That was the executive order from the federal government saying, if you're doing DEI and spending DEI money, DEI programs, you're not going to get money. They did that. They didn't want to take a chance of losing the $400,000 in federal funds we get. The library had an LGBTQ plus program scheduled. It got postponed. People wanted to support it. There was a big rally on Saturday morning. That will be scheduled. We just don't have a date and location for that rescheduling. By the way, I was there, and it was really moving to listen to the kids that the library has always been their safe place, and how upsetting it was to hear that people didn't want that to be supportive of them and everything else. Solar grants, it's almost sunny, but the grant money's finally come through. You're going to start to see solar panels added to the safety building and then to the recreation buildings. That will save us money going there. All right, the master plan. There had to be another public hearing because of the raid on at the library, and we went through that, and now that that's had those, no issues there. On June 3rd, we're having the first master plan implementation. So how are we going to start to do all these things? So that's this coming Tuesday. Speaking of the ZBA stuff, we only have what's on the agenda. There were 2 ZBA meetings. Notice of decisions by law is supposed to be 5 days, be posted within 5 days. It's not been happening this year. The agendas, we know they have to go out because they got to go to the butters. That's not posted. So, we timed the Civic News around that because we learned there was interest, but those notices of decisions just aren't there, and sorry, there's nothing we can do there for you. Also, if you go to the website, there's a link. There's a new visitors page. We had that committee, so if you haven't taken a look, there's a link. They did a real good job. All right, here's Alex, and let's find out what the heck is this place.
Good afternoon, everybody. Standing off Lock Road at the former Air Force Base Beacon Outer Marker Building, and we'll talk about that later, why it was here. But it is located on Lock Road between Harbor and the Boulevard. And in 1988, there was a restoration project by Troop 181 of the Boy Scouts to restore the area. The National Park Service, through the Department of the Interior, gifted this piece of land to the town of Rye under the Land to Parks program. And you'll read that on the sign. So this was Sam Weinbaum's idea, our videographer and Rye Civic League treasurer. And I think it's a brilliant idea because we're going to talk a little bit about the history of flying in Rye. Now, some of you may remember who have visited the museum in the past. For years, we had on the second floor a huge wall, and it was called Over Rye, and it was every aerial photograph we could find of the town. So that was pretty cool, and I've got a couple of those pictures here. But it's interesting, the Wright brothers, 1903, Kitty Hawk, right? You think everybody excited and see the potential of the airplane. Wrong. So the Wright brothers had to pack up their plane, take it across the ocean to Europe, and the Europeans saw that thing flying and they went crazy. And then the Americans said, oh, I guess we should go crazy too. And they did. That's a short story of a long story that happened after 1903. And then, of course, World War I, and we saw it just there. But what that led to are barnstormers, women and men dropping in all over hell's creation. It could have been your front yard, or it could have been the Pagoda Beach in front of the Pagoda Dance Hall in 1923, which is what you're looking at here when this woman or man stormer dropped in for lunch, maybe at Carberry's store, which would have just opened. Who knows? Okay, enough of that prop. All right, moving on. Since we got planes all over the place, we have to have airports. So I don't know the exact date, but the Portsmouth Municipal Airport existed. It was built between the wars. And in the museum, we have pictures of it during World War II with a B-29 bomber on the airport tarmac. And obviously, Hampton Airport was built at some time between the wars as well, because we had to accommodate all these people flying. Not just barnstormers, but regular freight but mostly it was private planes, and until the late 30s you started to have passenger flights. All right, so that brings us up to, oh, you want to see a little bit, this is kind of interesting too. When people dropped into Rye, what did it look like? That's what it looked like. Those are the original roads of Rye. It says 1954, but in fact, if it was 1904, it would be unchanged. Because we basically had no housing developments to speak of. You had Jennis Beach, but that's not really a development. That's just dense housing. But after the 1950s, the roads of Rye get denser, there's housing developments, cul-de-sacs, cut-through roads, etc. Okay, so now we're getting to 1956. And there were several years prelude to this. The Air Force was looking for a site for a major strategic air command base. And they finally chose that Portsmouth Municipal Airport, cut the town of Newington in half. Imagine Rye being cut in half by a major air base. And I remember as a kid, age 11, going over in the family Jeep and watching this massive construction project. It was huge. Just look at Pease Tradeport today and imagine that being built. After Pease Air Base opened, we had a huge influx of people from all over the country who became stationed at this large air base. As a result, the population of all of the seacoast towns, including the city of Portsmouth, became much more diverse to our great advantage in our culture. Sam also tells me that the runway at Pease Air Base, which is 3 miles long, is the only thing identifiable from space on the East Coast. And of course, as all of you probably know, the space shuttle could land there if it had to. So in order for the planes to come in to land at the airbase, they had to have this light or this beacon outer marker. So on the top of this building was some piece of equipment in which the planes could pick up radar or a light signal, and that would help them align to the runway. The runway is about 5 miles from Rye Center to touchdown. All right, so this base, we all know about it. It's a wonder I can still hear. Speak of the devil, here comes a plane, how appropriate. Coming right over the beacon outer marker. But when that's nothing. I just have to tell you people, after 1990, I had a party because I said, now I can hear again. Because before that, there were no mufflers on those huge bombers, B-47s, B-52s, horrific. And it was the most shattering sound, somewhat similar to the fighter jets when they occasionally come over. You know what that's? Imagine that on a bomber. All right. Well, finally then, we get to the end of Pease Air Force Base as a strategic air command, largest in the country. And in 1990, it closes, and Pease Tradeport took over, and that was one of the most successful transitions from military to civilian use of a former base. Just want to show you, speaking of aerial Rye, I knew you'd appreciate these. So here is a fabulous small plane came up, and you can even see the wing in the corner, took this aerial view of Rye Center in 1981. And that was part of that exhibit that was in the museum. And of course, we can't have a aerial view just of Rye Center. We'll conclude our little history of flying today in Rye, of course, with Genus Beach and Lock's Neck. Notice that's Lock's Neck. Straws Point is a housing community. Lock's Neck is the geographic point of land from the mid-1600s on. Thank you.